from the Career Development Team at the University of Chicago, and I am delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled Transitioning from Academia. Today our speaker will be Abby Stayart. Abby has been associated with the University of Chicago for over 20 years with both her undergraduate work and her PhD. It is my absolute pleasure to hand over the controls to Abby today.
Okay, Linda, can you see everything okay?
Yes, I can.
Terrific. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. As Linda kindly mentioned, I've been associated with the university for 20 years, which is kind of funny that I'm here to talk to you about leaving academia, because in fact I'm still operating parallel to it, but one of the ways that I operate within it is to help other people consider leaving it. So I am titling my talk Reinventing the Wheel, over and over and over. And let's see if I can make this look the right. Okay, so as you can see here, I received my bachelor's from the University of Chicago in 1997. For anyone who, I don't actually know if this concentration still exists, called tutorial studies, but it's one of those design your own major things. And as a consequence, I was studying gender studies and linguistics, and that was interesting. But the reason that I did that is because I was kind of up a creek. When I was in high school, was the theater person who flunked chemistry, and yet I really was interested in biology. And my science teacher, my biology teacher, said, "But remember, you're the theater person, and you didn't really do well in chemistry. So our advice to you is to follow that more humanistic theater pathway." So I did, and I came here for college, and for about 2 years maintained that humanistic bent and did a lot of theater and followed my passion for French, and then realized actually that I was really bored and that I needed to make a shift in order to remain interested in learning. And I was, by the way, really interested in biology. And yet, during my undergraduate time here, I dropped out of calculus. I had not developed the skills necessary to learn science. And so, in comes tutorial studies, I needed to figure out something that was going to be interesting to me. And so I developed an independent research project and studied the social conception of female sexuality at the turn of the century, the 20th century now, in America. So between 1890 and 1920, and I was looking at how things were changing and why they were changing as far as female sexuality was concerned, between basically the Victorian era and the Flapper era. And that was really interesting, and I got some interesting mentorship, and yet I just knew that that wasn't where I was going to go. I wasn't going to enter into academia as a professor of gender studies. I was just doing what needed to be done in order to leave. And as a consequence, oops, going the wrong way. As a consequence, I left. And I graduated, and that was terrific. And I entered the real world with the understanding that I was going to try a lot of things and figure out what part of science was interesting to me, if science was interesting to me, and really what that meant. And so, being without any credentials to do anything scientific, I did a bunch of other things and explored other interests along the way. And so I was a manager at Crate and Barrel, which of course is a customer service heavy thing, and I did a lot of waitressing. It was my fallback thing, which also very customer service oriented. I did some freelance lighting design, which I thought was kind of cool and artistic, and yet so unreliable and, a little, I don't know, I didn't really like the theater people so much. They're a little flighty. I needed more, I don't know, content. I wanted to really engage with people in an intellectual way, which I didn't find through house painting. I did find a little bit through itinerary writing. And then I was an administrative assistant at a bus company where something happened that made me really reconnect to science. It was the early 2000s, and the bird flu was happening, and Al Gore was running for president, and the Supreme Court was in the balance, and I was in Kansas City, Missouri, and I was surrounded by people who were refusing to engage in intellectual conversation about these really important issues. And some of the reasons they were refusing to engage was because they felt like they didn't have the background to do so. I don't know science. I can't understand what the flu is. I don't understand what stem cells are, and so I'll just let somebody else think about that and let somebody else make decisions about that, and I'll let them vote on that issue because that's what matters to them. And I don't really know about it. And so I started thinking that is a damn shame, and somebody needs to, learn that language of science and get back out into the public and help people make more informed decisions and participate in the electorate and take control of the way that they exist in the world. And so I decided I was going to, while still working full-time as an administrative assistant, I was going to go back to community college in the evenings, and I was going to start taking basically prerequisites for applying to graduate school, because I felt that getting a PhD was the way that I could gain the credentials to speak the language of science and then leave science and go back out into the world and talk about science in an intelligent and informed way, yet in the language that people commonly understand. Because you have to be respected both by people in the profession and by people outside the profession. And so I started going to community college, and that was fine, and I found some success there. I passed chemistry, and I passed Calc 2, which were critical hurdles for me. I began to build a little confidence. I took out $1 billion more in loans in order to go to college number 2, which was Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri, and immediately fell into a really nice mentorship relationship where I was an adult learner, and so I kind of stood out among the other students, and as such, the faculty members looked at me a little bit differently and provided a little bit more support and helped me make connections that I needed to make in order to prepare myself for graduate school. One of those connections was through an internship at a local research institution called the Stowers Institute for Cancer Research, and it was through an internship there that I met mentors who were supportive of my going to graduate school. And I am not lying to you when I say that that was my first sort of wake-up call to the importance of networking, because of the 9 schools that I applied to for graduate school, the 2 that I got into were through personal connections of my internship mentor. And so he basically got me into graduate school even though pretty much nobody believed that I could do it. So I came back to the University of Chicago, which apparently is kind of like a gravitational pull for me, and I continue to orbit the university. There's this, the life of the mind, that whole kind of addictive mentality drew me back, and I was here and was kind of adrift, and didn't do a great job at selecting a mentor for graduate school, and ended up in really dark places. Completely forgot why I went to graduate school. I became acculturated into the academia as the only route, and anything other than that isn't really worth us paying attention to. And so if you're not going to get the Nobel Prize, then we're going to basically show you the door and thanks for your help, but you didn't do a good job, and we're going to cut you down at the knees. And I had one of those experiences that was really, I didn't navigate it well, and I didn't find the type of mentorship that I needed. And partly that's because I didn't know myself. I didn't obviously my path here, I'm all over the place, and I made a lot of decisions that were overly optimistic or were ill-informed. And so here I was in graduate school for an embarrassing 8 years, which happens to some people. I mean, it's in the sciences. The average is 6. If you're like luck into an awesome project, you can get out in 5. But 6 to 8 is kind of the accurate window. And when I finished my project, sorry, I just got a really strange message that the broadcast is just starting. So I hope that I haven't been going up. Yeah. Linda?
My apologies. Small technical thing, but we've been able to see everything you have said and heard. Thank you.
Oh, okay. We've wasted 10 minutes of your time, which I don't want to do. So I got to the end, and I didn't really have anything to show for what I had done, and that's a bad place to be in when you're looking to make a career shift. I knew I wasn't going to stay in academia, but I didn't have any evidence that I had done anything else. Some of that's my fault. Some of it is I just didn't find the right type of mentorship when I was in that environment. And so I kind of hobbled my way into a postdoc in the sciences. A postdoctoral position is, it's essential if you want to stay in academia and move on to be a research scientist. It's also important if you want to go into industry and do research in industry. But for many people, a postdoc is a kind of treading water position. I would say about 60% of people who take on a postdoctoral research status are there not because they know that they're going to be scientists afterwards or develop a very successful research program or get a professorship, but because they didn't do the exploration or the career prep that they needed in order to make a different step. And so, as you can see from my ID card, I was very happy to have made it into my postdoctoral position, and it was at that moment that I found a mentor who was kind and comforting and welcoming, and I don't think he was the best mentor for me because I mean, for whatever reason, but he gave me a safe space to recover and rediscover myself. And that's part of this story, because through that process of rediscovery, I have, look at, I'm like developing tears. Through that process of rediscovery, I am in a position that I am really well suited for, and I'm really happy. Wow. Okay, so one of the things that I can point out here is that I reinvented the wheel a bunch of times, and most of the time I didn't do it with a whole lot of intention or with any planning or strategy. I would not suggest that. It is inefficient, and it can be very depressing to make a lot of shifts and to not do any of them very well. So part of the reason that I didn't do them very well is my personal narrative was not so awesome. I started in high school with I can't do science. And then I got to college and I left college with I have no idea with what I want to do. And then out in the real world, I have a total loss for what to do. Just sort of heightened my lack of direction. And then I came up with a tentative, I think maybe I know what I want to do, but I really should put myself through my paces in order to really prove it that I, am dedicated and worth it and can, hold muster with the best of them. And then I went down to like my darkest days where I couldn't do anything. I did not have any inkling of optimism that there was going to be a successful way out for me. And then I turned a corner, which I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. But I came to, well, okay, I've got to do something, and I'd really like to be good at it. That's what became my goal, do something I'm good at. And then now I am at a place where I truly believe that you need to do something that you love, and that when you're doing it, you need to love it, and that it's probably the best idea to also be good at it. Now, I've mentioned mentorship already a couple times, and I'm going to point out that mentorship matters, and I'll reiterate this a couple times. You can see here on the left-hand side where perhaps the mentors that I pursued weren't the best mentors for me, and it really has nothing to do with them. I mean, you could say that the mentors weren't sensitive to your needs, or you could say that whatever, you could blame it on them. But that's not a very responsible or realistic way to go about it, because it's not their job. It's your job to find the people, to know yourself, and to make informed decisions along the way, and preferably to not make 8-year commitments without knowing that that is going to be a positively challenging experience. And so I'm going to take full responsibility for my lack of understanding of myself and what I needed. And then on the right-hand side, you can see with my sort of upwards trajectory that I began to think about mentorship in a different way, and I began to think about myself in a different way, and set my goals, and I understood myself better, and I understood what I needed, and I sought those people out. So I came to a breaking point. It was about 7.5 years in, and I was at this point of I can't do anything. I lost my best friend to cancer, and wow, sorry. My mentor at the time was very insensitive to that, and I basically said, I don't care about this anymore. If this is what academia is going to be, then I'm done. I'm really, really done. And so I looked around and wondering what the things that I did that were good. And I was a great aunt, and I found my husband, and I did the Avon walk, and I thought, you know what, I deserve better than this. Wow, sorry everybody. I did not expect to go here, but it was a really, really transitional time, and it forced me to that moment of, like, how am I going to make a different decision? What is absolutely critical to me as I move forward? And what was critical to me was that I be in an environment where I felt supported, and that I'd be doing something that I knew I could do well. I'd faced a whole lot of failure, and one of the things that you do when you're at the bench doing research is you fail a lot. You fail every day. You pretty much presume that you're going to fail every day, and you're going to tweak something a little bit, and then you're going to fail, and then you're going to evolve it, and you're going to fail. And I lost interest in that, and I just really wanted to do something where I could go to work and I could say, this I can do, and I can do it well, and I can be confident that I can do it. So during my postdoc, I mentioned that I was in this kind of like safe, comforting space. And what that meant was I was able to speak honestly with my mentor about what I needed and where I was going. And although he would have loved it if I had become a scientist and like taken over his project, he knew that I was really on a mission of self-discovery. And so I took advantage of that opportunity, and I started exploring the things and trying to get to know myself a little bit better. And to do that, I took some personal assessment sort of tools. The myIDP is one that you can find with Science Careers, or the Myers-Briggs test. There are several of them. And it helped me to reconnect with the things that mattered to me, and to remind myself of what I was good at. And part of the two things that it really pointed me towards was teaching, which of course you remember why I went into graduate school, and then it also pointed me towards program development and specifically kind of administrative management. And so I started dabbling in both, and I, wanted to just get as much done as possible, as quickly as possible. So I did some teaching at Loyola and Loyola University here in Chicago, and I did some volunteering for a postdoctoral association, and just tried to use whatever avenues were available to me to explore my potential and what made me tick. And this is where I'm going to say that this is the one reinvention that that was successful because it ended up with me in this spot. So I can even say now, a friend actually asked to look at what our hood, like our PhD hoods, look like from the University of Chicago. You can see it in 2 pictures here, and so I had it in my closet. So I pulled it out a couple of days ago and I took some pictures. And then I realized while I was taking those pictures that I was also wearing this shirt that I had purchased for myself a couple of years ago. And this is where I stand now, which is a pretty victorious place, and I'm happy with that. So, how to start your fresh start, because I get the sense that people may be looking for a fresh start. So, actually, Linda, at this point, could I get a sense of who's on the line with question 1? Let's see. So, what is your terminal degree? Now, I'm not quite sure how this next.
So I am seeing here, it looks like we have overwhelmingly 80% PhD, 20% master's.
Okay, so then hopefully what I'm saying resonates with some of you. I don't have experience with a master's program. I do know people who have gone through master's programs, and I do know that they're quite different, but I do think that the process of self-discovery and choosing a mentor is relevant to everybody. Linda, what's the second question? Maybe it's probably worth asking now.
What is your broad field of study? And I'm seeing we're pretty evenly split at about 36% social sciences, 33 biological, physical, natural sciences, and then 28 humanities.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. And now I think questions 3 and 4 are more about where you're at in your job search and sort of professional status. So number 3, what's your current employment status? Are you still in school? Are you thinking about looking for a new job? Are you really actively in the job search process?
We have 40, still coming in, like about 44% thinking about looking for a new job, 50%, 20% actively looking for a new job, and 30% still in school.
Okay, so I have a little bit of information for everybody, and for those who are still in school, you might benefit from having a little further sight down the road, and for those who are still thinking about it, it's time to start thinking about it more, and for those who are actively searching, hopefully I have some advice for that too. And now finally, question 4. Right. Are you considering a field switch? Are you leaving academia and moving into nonprofit, or leaving academia and hoping to go into business? And are you looking to spin yourself in a way that you aren't doing right now?
We are looking at 91% yes.
Okay, that's pretty obvious. Well, good, because that's sort of what we're here to talk about, right? Okay, so we can go back to my presentation. Is that something you do on your end?
We can already see you, so if you just put it in presenter mode.
Okay. There we go. Terrific. Okay, so how to start your fresh start? Well, obviously, from my perspective, and perhaps from some of your perspectives as well, maybe you've gotten a bit downtrodden and you kind of feel like, well, you can't really do anything other than what you're already doing, and that's when you need to reframe your perspective, and you just have to try to put aside the negativity and tone down your self-doubt, because spinning yourself is about being a salesperson, and it's really difficult to convince somebody to buy something that you don't also believe in. So you've got to figure out a way to do it. And one of the ways that I chose, actually, is to choose a mantra to make as my password for my Outlook and a lot of different things. And so every time I logged into my computer, it was find balance in all things, or believe in yourself today, tomorrow, and forever, right? Like something that every single time I engaged in it, I was just repeating this phrase. And you know, sometimes it wouldn't lodge, I wouldn't think about it. But other times I would think, okay, good to remember that, and I'm moving forward. So I mentioned that while I was a postdoc, I took some of these self-assessment tools, and I advise you strongly to take multiple, identify them. If you need help finding which they are, you know, ask me, ask any kinds of Google search will help you to identify a self-assessment tool. You need to remember what you liked and who you were before you started doing this thing that perhaps you don't like anymore. Identify what's meaningful to you, what gives you energy, what you don't resent. Understand your strengths. Focus on your strengths, in fact, and try to disregard your failures for a little bit. They're important, because you need to choose things that you're not going to fail at all the time. That's not going to be real helpful for your perspective, reframing the perspective part. But hopefully you can try to be a little bit more neutral in the way you look at yourself and the transition specifically. You might know that you're awesome, which you probably are, and you might know that you're really, really well qualified, which you probably are. I mean, you definitely are. If you're engaged with the University of Chicago, you're definitely well qualified. But you also are probably insecure about what's going to happen next, and we all do that. We all feel that, and yeah, we have to be realistic. So find out what gives you energy, what takes energy, and hopefully you can figure out some balance, and that can help you to then be more strategic in identifying your mentors and people who you might call your proponents. I would distinguish mentors and proponents, because mentors can be kind of, I would say, like inactive. They can be like consultants in your life, and they're absolutely critical. You're also going to need to have proponents, people who are really in your corner, who can remind you of your worth and your skills and your value, and help you to envision yourself in a different way. If you have access, and I would just, you know, find a career advisor. Sometimes you could hire a career advisor. There are such services out there, and listen to these people, because very frequently you've convinced yourself of one thing, and their outside perspective can help redirect or question and challenge you in ways that you need to be challenged. Phase 2, in my opinion, once you know yourself, and right, which is of course something you can get done in a number of months, once you know yourself better and you've reconnected to the things that you like to do, and maybe you even have a understanding of what you might want to shift into, you just need to get to the networking. Don't start networking if you're going to sound really dumb. Okay, like you can be naive. You can be naive and you can own it, but if you are going to waste people's time, that's not going to help you in your networking process. So learn how to network, learn how to use LinkedIn, learn how to execute an informational interview, know what they are, and specifically know what they aren't. And then you have to start with your materials right away, because they're going to evolve with every single time you reinvent yourself. So look at your resume, which by the way is not a CV. We're going to fly through some career development slides that were lent to me by some dear friends at UChicago grad. Thank you, Brianna and Mike, for sharing your materials. If you're listening out there, you'll recognize them immediately. But you need to start reframing your resume, and you need to do it a bunch of times, and you need to tailor it over and over and over again. Never ever submit the same resume to different jobs. It won't work. Always say thank you. I hope that you know that, and yet it is essential for your network to understand that you're grateful for the time that they are spending with you. One of the things, so here's this picture of reinventing the wheel. I think one of the critical elements in reinventing the wheel is learning how to talk about your skills, learning how to talk about what you did in graduate school, and learning how to do it so that it makes sense to people who are outside your environment. You need to answer for them what you've done that relates to the job that they're advertising. Now, here's some advice. You need to think about your dissertation or even your thesis writing process as an exercise in project management. You can look up Google Project Management. You can learn principles of project management, and you'll see right away that what you've done as a graduate student aligns perfectly with project management. And so many job ads out there looking for people with project management experience. Well, you have it. You just need to look at what you've done and describe it that way. You need to see and hopefully have engaged in extracurricular activities. If you haven't, then start doing so in meaningful ways so that when it's on your resume, you can talk about it thoughtfully. Having done so will demonstrate that you can interact with people outside of your special topic that you've been studying, which most people don't actually care about. But you can speak normally to an audience who who want you to be normal, and so engaging in things outside of the lab or outside of your research will help to convince them of that. It will also show them that you have the potential of multitasking and that you perhaps can manage projects, you can demonstrate leadership skills if you can, work your way into developing that in your volunteer activity. And then finally, something that people don't emphasize enough would be their soft skills. And through your research and through all of your interactions with your collaborators and through all of your interactions with your lab members, or everybody has challenged your communication skills, whether it's from sharing equipment or dealing with collaborators in different time zones. You have demonstrated communication skills, and you need to learn how to talk about those. So here are a bunch of examples. When you see the little icon down here in the bottom, this is UChicago grad material that I may have shortened because they run these amazing workshops all on transferable skills. So this is like an entire presentation boiled down to 4 bullet points. But what you're going to find through that process, or where you want to get, is to a place where you no longer feel that you're comparing apples and oranges. You no longer feel that your academic experience has nothing to do with the job that you're applying for. You really need to marry the two and describe clearly for the people that you're speaking to how your apples and oranges are related. There's a difference between a CV and a resume. If you aren't familiar with this, you've got to figure it out. Academics use CVs. Anybody outside of academia uses a resume, and there are very clear differences. I'm not going to go through them all right here. You can find them on Google. So here they are for the screenshot if you want it, but know what they are and conform to them, because if you submit a 7-page resume to me, it's going to be really frustrating. That's not a resume, that's a CV, and so if somebody's asking for a resume, know that it's a 1 to 2 page, one sheet of paper, 2 sides at the max. If you can't say what you need to say in that 2 sides of 1 sheet, you need to boil it down. You need to get help from anybody you can to help distill your experiences down to what's most relevant, because there are very few people outside of academia who are going to dedicate the time needed to read a 7-page CV. Just don't do it. It's not worth your time or the time of the person that you're submitting it to. So how to tailor your resume. This is absolutely critical. Once again, thank you, UChicago grad, for providing content for this. This is another element in recreating your wheel. You must do this. And one of the first steps, and I followed this list exactly because I had no idea how to talk about my skills, and I had no idea how to communicate that I understood what a job was. And so print out the job description and start highlighting. Make sure that you can identify in your own personal skill set something that equates to what's in the job ad. Pay attention when you are creating your resume for that job. Pay attention to how they structure their job ad. they are listing things in order of importance. And so you should be addressing things in that same order in order to convince them that you have paid attention to what they're looking for and that you actually are the good fit. You can take strategies, use the same words that they use in their job ad, and definitely don't overlook the soft skills that they say that they want. And this refers back to earlier. You have soft skills. You may not know them, but you need to identify them and be able to talk about them and say, okay, well, my leadership skill that you don't know about because you don't work in a lab, my leadership skill was mentoring 2 undergraduates and managing the shared equipment for the entire department, right? That's leadership, but they don't know that. You have to lay it out. And this is the embarrassing and sometimes really humiliating part, but get over it. You need to share your materials with your mentors and your friends and your proponents. They need to see them. They're outside your perspective. They can help slash if you need to. You need to share and you need to listen. Oops. So I'll just go all the way through here so you can see what's there. The purpose of your cover letter, make sure you're real focused. Please don't, shorten the margins to ½ inch and take up the entire page. It's almost insulting. Make sure you're talking about what they want to hear, because you'll lose them. Be directed. If you have caught them with your resume and with your cover letter, they will call you for an interview and you can expand on it. Don't omit really important things. Know what you need to communicate. And make sure that they understand that you have legitimate interest in the specific job that they're offering at that company. Never reuse a cover letter without completely looking at every single word and making sure it makes sense to have it there. Okay, so again, we're now looking at, there are 25 minutes left, so I'm going to go faster. We're almost there. But how to tailor your cover letter, again, this is really critical. I've said don't submit the same cover letter. Make sure you know about the company. I mean, that seems like so obvious, but for you to submit a cover letter that is obviously written for another company is the surest way to not get considered. You have to make them know that you're interested in that job specifically, and if you don't have the time to do that, then it's almost not worth doing it because you're not going to get anything out of it. They're not going to contact you. You're not going to get the interview experience. It's just not worth it. Either take the time or skip it. So yes, if you can do some resourcing, find some people who work there, find some alums, use your alum network. You can cite conversations so it really shows that you've done your research, and again, use the job description, incorporate words that they will recognize, that they will say these were important enough words that we put them in our job description, and they will say, she read the job description, good for her. And then anytime you add an example of what you've done, make sure that you explain why it's relevant to that company. You can give me examples of 15 different things you've done, and if I don't understand why it's relevant to the job that I'm hiring for, once again, it shows that you aren't really thinking about your fit with my position. And then, if at all possible, figure out who to actually address the letter to. It shouldn't take that much effort. And if you address it to, even if you say, okay, the recruiting committee, that's fine. Don't address it to the wrong person. If there are multiple people, address it to both teams who are hiring so that you're not offending people. But just be careful. Don't think that that's not important because it is. And again, early on, my graduate school experience, I got into the graduate schools that I was able to network my way into, and I cannot you cannot overestimate the importance of that. I don't know the exact number, and a career advisor or Google could tell you, but something like 80% of jobs will report that they got through networking. Very few people are getting jobs just by submitting cold turkey and not having someone in the company who can at least say, oh yeah, here's the resume of this person, please, just put it to the top of the pile. Because that's what happens. Anybody who comes with a personal reference of any sort will be looked at. In order to be a successful networker, you need to demonstrate why you're helpful to them. Forget how they're helpful to you. That's hopefully they will be down the road. But that's not, you don't start with, oh, how can you help me? You start with, oh, I might have some, connections for you. And so to that end, if you strike up some interesting conversations, follow up, stay in their brain, Hopefully use the right name. Never ask for a job that turns people off immediately. And then take proactive steps. Once you've started that networking, practice that networking. Take every opportunity, even if you don't think it's going to lead to a job. Go to that poster session or go to that seminar and just, you know, try to meet 2 new people and practice the elevator pitch, and always think about how you can contribute to the conversation by offering them something. Not what can they offer to you. What can you offer them? How can you be valuable? Why will they want to stay in contact with you later? What can you do for them? Right? I mean, that's what drives us all, right? So, and then if you're really serious about it, set some time up. I mean, if you are on the market and you are actively looking for a job, you need to be actively growing your network, and you need to do that through spending an hour on LinkedIn per week, and you need to do that by following up with conversations and taking those business cards and shooting out emails to say, hey, it was nice to meet you, this part of the conversation was interesting, you know, here's this other thought I had. Okay, so LinkedIn, I've mentioned several times. There is a LinkedIn group for UChicago alumni. Use it. Make sure that you have a full profile. If you don't have a photo, get a photo. Have some friends, take a good photo, get a photo. It's really hard to trust someone if they don't have a photo on their LinkedIn profile. And then take advantage of any groups that you can possibly join to expand your connection. All students, postdocs, and alumni have access to UChicagoalumni.org. You don't have access to all UChicago services. If you are outside of 5 years of graduation, you can't use some of the career services that exist for recent alums and current students and postdocs, but you can certainly resource your alumni community and find mentors and advisors within that community who have made similar transitions as you. Okay, informational interviews. I'm skipping this because there needs to be time for questions. Know what an informational interview is. Know what it isn't. It's not a job interview. Please, for all of the times that I've been asked to come for an informational interview, it drives me crazy when people have outrageous expectations for what that's going to be. It's not about, do I have a job? And it's not about, please, you know, spend an hour with me. You know, that's kind of rude to expect that somebody's going to spend that much time with you when you have not demonstrated your worth to them, right? So you need to use all of your social skills, and you need to be careful about what not to do in order to put too much pressure on the person, because that turns people off immediately. When you're preparing for this talk, make sure you come knowing who the person is. You know, somebody referred somebody to me, and it's like I met with them, and they hadn't even looked at my LinkedIn profile. Like, they didn't even know why they were sitting down with me, and that, you know, lost me immediately. Like, I'm not here to tell my personal story if you don't really have any interest in it. It's not going to be informative, and you're not going to come back with some interesting questions. I need to know that you've thought about it. So prepare specific questions. Practice why you want to talk to me. Why them specifically? Not just, oh, I'm kind of interested in academic administration. Why me? Dress professionally. You never ever get a second chance to make the first impression, and by all means, please respect their time by arriving on time. Don't stand them up. That has happened. Make sure that your meeting is starting when it's supposed to meet, even if they're not there on time. You're there, you're waiting, and make sure that you end on schedule, and that you are the one who's keeping time, and you're the one who's saying, okay, we have 5 minutes left, I want to be respectful of your time, because they really have taken time out of their life to spend some time with you. So, what are your next steps? Identify your mentors and your proponents. Speak with a career advisor if at all possible. If that means hiring someone, I think it's worth it. Get business cards that are professional looking. There are all sorts of templates online. You can even find them on the University of Chicago website and places. I invite you to find me on LinkedIn and identify yourself. And if you use proper LinkedIn etiquette, you're going to send me a small paragraph in the invite telling me why and how you found out about me, and why perhaps it would be beneficial to have me in your network. And I won't turn you down as long as you're not trying to sell me something. But make sure that your profile is up to date, because as soon as you start reaching out to people, they're going to start looking at your profile. And if you don't, you know, relate well, if you don't look like you are taking it seriously, they're not going to take you seriously, and then they're, you know, you're kind of automatically disqualifying yourself. If you're ready to start start. You need to start reaching out to people. You need to reach out on LinkedIn. You need to send emails. You need to schedule informational interviews. And then you need to keep track of those people and make sure you follow up. So here's my email address, and I have not left very much time for questions, but Linda, I think now I hand it over to you to make sure that happens, right?
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Abby. Everything you have said has resonated a lot with our audience today. This is a question that is a little from the opposite direction. Do you have any advice for somebody who's thinking of transitioning from a nonprofit background into academia to go back and get a PhD to teach? And what are the steps or processes to think about that and to know if that is the right step?
Sure. Well, one, know that you're not going to get paid much more moving from a nonprofit back into academia. You might make a little bit more money ultimately, but hopefully you're not doing it for pay. I think that academic institutions understand people who are mission-driven and understand that you are probably pursuing an additional degree or a deeper understanding of something because you're really motivated by it and have the potential to do something great once you have that information. And so I would think that your graduate application should focus on why that additional education is going to change you and how you're going to use that education once you have it, so that someone who's admitting you to a program can have an idea that it's going to benefit you. I mean, in some cases they're paying you to be there. In other cases you're paying yourself by taking out loans. And so for that reason, you should be really clear on what you expect to get from it on the other side. So I think, I mean, obviously, from moving from nonprofit to academia, you're not going to expect a raise, so you don't need to address that in your application. I would honestly think that the connection to the mission of your new program and how it's going to change you and how you're going to benefit from it would probably be an effective story to tell in that application. What was the second half of the question?
How do you determine if that is the right thing that you should do, if getting a PhD is in your best interest?
Yeah, ask a lot of questions. I'm pretty confident a PhD was not necessary for me. I mean, ultimately it absolutely has been, and I'm really glad that I did it. A PhD in the sciences, and probably a PhD in anything from the University of Chicago, trains you to think about things in ways that the broad world doesn't think about things. It turns you into a really stringent, analytical, deep thinker. So the training process of probably many graduate degrees, but certainly a PhD, the outcome makes you into a really desirable job candidate. And people who have experience with successful PhDs, meaning hiring, people who are on the hiring end understand what they're getting when they're interviewing somebody who has a PhD, because it's almost like if you got a PhD, then you have project management skills, and you probably have communication skills, and you certainly have the attention to craft and perfectionism that anyone would appreciate in an employee. That being said, there are lots of jobs for which you do not need a PhD, and a PhD is an exhausting, time-consuming thing. There's a cost-benefit analysis that you need to do. Every year that you're in school, you are losing income because school is not going to pay you as much as the real world is. So if I had asked more questions before I started graduate school, I would have learned that I didn't need a PhD to communicate science. I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of that person who always goes for the biggest, highest thing possible, so I might have gone for a PhD anyway, but I certainly didn't need one to do the thing that I thought I wanted to do. In many cases, a master's is perfectly sufficient, and perhaps even not even a master's. I mean, perhaps even it's just a great idea to do a lot of volunteering and meet a lot more people, and that will network your way into where you want to be, and an additional degree isn't even really necessary.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have another question. Do you have any advice for folks who are pursuing a PhD while also working full-time, and how to market that degree once they are finished?
Wow. Well, wow. First of all, that's pretty respectable. I can't imagine doing that. How to market the degree? Well, I imagine that you see a benefit to the degree, or else you wouldn't be putting yourself through this incredibly strenuous and demanding process. So, I mean, I would say that again, I would focus on mission. I think everybody is inspired by someone who finds the energy to do something extraordinary. And if you are pursuing an additional degree because you are inspired to do so, then in your next job, you need to emphasize that because you really care about this thing, you have been managing two literally full-time positions, and you were committed to it, and you were driven by a desire to make a difference, or to improve your this and that, or to contribute to take your career to the next level, because you understood that your current terminal degree had a glass ceiling. So I mean, I can't imagine somebody who is simultaneously doing a PhD having a problem with gaining respect for from the next person that they apply to a job for. So just make sure that they understand it's relevant, and that you're not just wishy-washy, like that you're doing it for a purpose, and hopefully that purpose is relevant to the job that you're applying for. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have time for a few more questions. Here's one. Do you recommend or know of any industries or companies that are more friendly to hiring academics in non-academic roles?
Academia. Sorry to say that, but it's true. I think academia understands the value of a trained mind, and as a consequence, it's if you can find something in an institution that you respect, where you found a niche that works for you, then perhaps the reason that you stayed in academia for so long is because you like that environment or whatever it offers. And so don't discount academia. There are many other places outside the University of Chicago, although I personally don't demonstrate that. They do exist. So academic degrees, if you're, I mean, I imagine this at least partially depends upon what your degree is in. So in a lot of cases, you have to kind of apologize for your degree if you've gotten a PhD at an ivory tower institution, and so you really have to focus more on what your education helped you be, like what types of skills you learned through that process, rather than name dropping and bragging. I think that if you communicate it clearly and you understand what your transferable skills are, that anywhere would be open to hiring you. I really think the I think that it lies on you to explain why you're valuable, and because I think, I mean, for example, government policy, communications, consulting, marketing, all of these things that I can think of really could benefit from a trained mind, and you can communicate that to them. That falls on you. You need to learn how to do it. But they all need us. It's true. It's true. They need us, and you need to believe that without coming off as cocky. Honestly, you do have value. You need to and then communicate it. I can't think of a single place that wouldn't appreciate someone who came and could be a good and efficient and positive contribution to their community. And in a way, your specific background doesn't matter. I mean, it will matter. The content matters. They're hiring you perhaps for some kind of content specificity. But I can't imagine that there's discrimination if you are able to communicate why your background is appropriate for that environment. Kind of a long-winded answer to that one.
It was wonderful. And our last question of the day, these are all really wonderful. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Is a PhD a legitimate reason to ask for a higher salary, or is it something that once you are finished with the PhD and you're on more solid ground to then go back and ask for more money?
Oh, so I think it's industry specific. There are certain, I mean, there are certain industries, and by industry I mean workforce sectors, not industry research specifically, where PhD equals this starting salary, and you can find that kind of stuff on Glassdoor by Googling. So there are environments where a PhD obviously equals more money, and you should know that. I mean, it lies on you to know that, so that when you go into that interview or when you go into accepting a job you offer, you know what's due to you. That being said, the promise of a PhD is not a PhD. If you are in a PhD program, that does not mean that you have one, and so I don't think that you, I don't know. I mean, honestly, this is a question I don't feel terribly qualified to answer, but I would think that saying, well, I have a PhD, so therefore I deserve more, is not going to work real well in most situations. That there is a broad understanding that a PhD is an advanced degree and that you have qualifications that probably exceed those of someone who has a bachelor's degree, and therefore you are deserving of a higher salary. But you need to know your environment, and you need to know when you're asking for something that's unreasonable. I would imagine that, you know, plus or minus 10% is what's negotiable in most environments. And they're going to start you. I mean, your starting offer is basically gonna, you know, it's basically gonna be what you're gonna get. It's what they think you're worth, and they're ready to move a little bit. But I don't think that having a PhD becomes an entitlement. You know, unless you just really spin it the right way. I don't have an example of how to do that, but I would warn against it personally. But that's just because I think that's because of the fear that the world has of highly educated people. That if they feel that you think you're entitled, you are going to be less likely to have a positive influence or outcome with them. So that's my advice with that. With 2 minutes left. For that one, I definitely think it's worth doing, worth resourcing a network, worth figuring out who's working in that area, and they have experience and they can probably give you much more informed advice than I can on this specific question. LinkedIn, that's where you go for that one. Glassdoor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Abby. That does bring us to the end of our presentation today. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful questions. And Abby has made herself available on LinkedIn, so please take advantage of expanding your network. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing you again.
Everybody who joined, it was my pleasure. Don't hesitate to reach out.